In September of 2025, a group of about 20 activists gathered on the side of a busy highway in Elizabeth, New Jersey, to protest a company called Always.
Every time, always lies.
Every time, always lies.
Neighborhood in Gaza.
It's a freight forwarding company, meaning that their job is to move shipments of goods from seaports to their destination. And these activists want Always to cut their ties with an Israeli shipping company called Sim. That's because they say that the company is shipping military goods that might eventually be used against Palestinians in Gaza.
Free, free, free Palestine!
Free, free, free Palestine!
One of the activists who attended is a college student at Temple University in Philadelphia who grew up in New Jersey. And when he heard that the action in front of Always was happening, it was important to him to make the trip.
I'm back in Jersey, and I saw that there was an action against them shipping, and it's really important, I think, that the global movement for Palestine, specifically in the West, has actually shifted a lot from more like mass rallies and mass mobilizations, which are still useful, to specifically targeting logistics companies. And
targeting logistics companies, as in the ones that organize and move goods through the supply chain, has become a strategic focus for the pro-Palestine movement. These companies do things like shipping, trucking, and warehousing. And for organizers who've been protesting for 2 years without much leverage, this kind of strategy is pumping new energy into their movement.
Earlier in the beginning of the summer and towards the end of the school year, when the deportations were happening, personally, I felt that the movement had stagnated because we hadn't really found a sense of political direction. Now I'm a lot more excited because I genuinely feel like this shift to targeting logistics and weapons manufacturers in a concentrated manner can actually deliver results. Because I think of it as a machine. If you hit the entire machine with feathers, then nothing's gonna happen. But if you target a single part of the machine with a hammer, you can actually stop it from working and stop it from functioning.
Zim is a killer, don't move Zim!
Zim is a killer, don't move Zim, always!
This particular protest is happening just a couple of miles away from Port Elizabeth, where every day, workers move over $500 million in cargo. So for activists who want to block cargo, the port is a critical place to be. The closer that they are to where those ships hit the shores, the closer they are to stopping the supply of military goods at the source. And the people closest to that point of contact are the ones who are responsible for unloading that cargo from the ships, the dockworkers. At some ports around the world, it's the longshore workers themselves who are taking up the task of blocking military shipments bound for Israel. Since the beginning of the war in Gaza, trade unions in Sweden, Morocco, India, and Italy, among others, have refused to work ships they suspect are carrying weapon parts to Israel.
This is the port of Ravenna in northern Italy. A few days ago, dockworkers took action to block the transport of weapons to Israel.
We realized that these containers had a risk classification of 1.4S, which is an international classification reference number for explosives. At that point, we became suspicious.
In September, Italian dockworkers also threatened to shut down all of Europe if Israel blocked a flotilla of international activists headed for Gaza, carrying humanitarian aid, which helped spark a nationwide 24-hour strike in Italy.
Yes, there has been widespread disruption throughout the country. The unions are saying some 100,000 people have taken to the streets in the financial capital of Milan, here in Rome.
But Israel doesn't get most of its military equipment from Europe. 70% of its weapons actually come from the United States, making American ports a place of critical importance if this kind of activism is going to work. And in the United States, things are pretty different from Sweden or Italy. That's in large part because of the stark contrast in the state of organized labor, but also because the two American coasts have two very different unions whose politics are night and day. On the East Coast, the conservative International Longshoremen's Association, the ILA, boasts a, quote, deep and passionate patriotism. And they even break their strikes to handle military cargo. While the West Coast International Longshore and Warehouse Union, the ILWU, to which my dad also belongs, has a long history of refusing to load ships with cargo from human rights violators. Whether that was fascist Italy in the 1930s or apartheid South Africa in the 1980s. The Union also has a long history of shutting down ports to demand the end of U.S. military action in Iraq and Afghanistan.
The ILWU has shut down its entire West Coast as a message to Mr. Bush that we are tired of this war and that it has to come to an end.
On this episode of Things That Go Boom, as American ports become a new front line for Palestine solidarity, we look at what happens when a global protest movement runs up against the politics of U.S. labor and the defense industry. How much power do workers really have to stop the flow of war? I'm Lacey Healy.
You should tell the people who we are and what our new show is.
I'm Robert Smith, and this is Jacob Goldstein, and we used to host a show called Planet Money.
And now we're back making this new podcast about the best ideas and people and businesses in history.
And some of the worst people, horrible ideas, and destructive companies in the history of business. We struggled to come up with a name, decided to call it Business History.
You know why?
Why?
Because it's a show about the history of business. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.
From Zuckerman Spader. For 5 decades, Zuckerman Spader has been a leading litigation firm trusted by in-house and outside counsel, businesses, and individuals. With offices in Washington, Baltimore, New York, and Tampa, Zuckerman Spader serves clients throughout the country and around the world in high-stakes disputes, enforcement matters, investigations, and at trial. When the lawyer you choose matters most. Online at Zuckerman.com. A corpse explodes inside the Vatican, a papal doctor who hides behind lies and illicit photographs. For decades, the scandal surrounding Dr. Riccardo Gailazzi lay buried in shame and silence. It's a staggering story, one that takes in a foiled plot against Hitler inside the Vatican, occult fixers, pseudoscientists, corruption scandals, and a chain of events stranger than fiction. Now, after years of archival research and work with declassified records, the full truth is coming to light. Spanning Nazi-occupied Rome to the shadowy dawn of the Cold War, Riccardo, the man who blew up the Pope, is a true crime investigation grounded entirely in documentary evidence. It blends history and espionage to reveal one of the strangest scandals the Church tried to forget, the desecration of Pius XII and the betrayal that followed. Listen to Riccardo, the man who blew up the Pope, wherever you get your podcasts.
Right before the protest in front of Always Forwarding, our producer, Alana Levinson, went to meet one of the organizers, Tova Fry.
There's some people coming from New York, and they just said there's an accident on the highway, so that's why they're running late.
Think about the Red Sea. The people of Israel were cornered between the waters and Pharaoh's army.
I think that was specifically aimed at our picket line.
Tova is an activist with a group called Port Workers and Communities for Palestine. Recently, she's been organizing protests in New Jersey a couple times per month. But she's also been involved with campaigns like these for many years, particularly ones that target Zim Shipping Company. Activists like Tova are hoping to deal a blow to Israel's ability to do business around the world through the country's logistics companies, especially the companies they say are involved in moving military supplies.
So we started setting up this picket line here at Always Forwarding to try to encourage them to drop Zim and don't move the Zim cargo. It's actually a very small part of their business, and they wouldn't be hurting that much if they dropped it.
Tova is a Jewish woman in her 70s based in New Jersey. While she was unloading signs and a megaphone from her van in a parking lot next to the Always Forwarding headquarters, she talked about how her family's history brought her to this work.
My grandparents, all of them were killed during the Holocaust. And after the war, my parents tried to come to the U.S., but there was a quota against Eastern European Jews. The U.S. and Britain, they didn't want Jews either after the war.
So her parents went to one of the only places they could go, the newly formed State of Israel.
My family wound up in Israel penniless, and some Israeli soldiers stole a home from a Palestinian family and gave it to my parents, and that's where I was born.
Tova was born in 1949, right after 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled from the war between the newly independent State of Israel and nearby Arab countries. Palestinian refugees were never allowed back after that, and it was common that Jewish immigrants took up residence in the homes that Palestinians left behind. Coming from a refugee family, it was hard for Tova to stomach that the house she was born in had been taken from other refugees.
And when I learned that history after I was in high school, it really started to make me think about what had happened there and wanting to do something about it.
Tova's family left Israel and moved to the U.S., where she spent much of her life in anti-war activism. For many years, she lived in Oakland, California, where she participated for the first time in a campaign to block shipments of cargo to Israel.
This kind of campaign is called social movement unionism.
It's a term that refers to the practice of unions that get involved working with social movements or social movements that get involved working with unions. And they form synergies to advance the interests of both.
This is Katie Fox Hodess. She's a researcher in employment relations at the University of Sheffield.
And my research is on dockworkers unions globally, on international labor solidarity, and on worker power.
Katie works closely with her colleague, Rafeef Ziada.
I teach at King's College London in the International Development Department. I am Palestinian, and Katie and I came to know each other through our work on logistics, docks, and dockworkers.
Katie and Rafeef have taken a close look at the foundations of social movement unionism and how this strategy operates in practice.
Issues facing workers don't just impact workers, they have a broader impact in the society, and workers are part of their communities. And so it makes sense for unions and community organizations to work together in this way.
One reason that it's so valuable for activists to collaborate with workers is that workers have leverage. They can bargain with their employers for change, and while that's usually in the context of better working conditions, workers can also bargain over social issues. And dock workers in particular, they're known for their willingness to engage in this kind of political activity around the world. Katie says that that's because ports are internationally oriented by nature, making workers historically key transmitters of new information.
Of politics, of new ideas, of, what's happening to workers in other countries.
To this day, dock workers around the world are organized in ways that put them in regular contact with one another. One reason for this is that workers can help each other by refusing to unload cargo across multiple ports during labor disputes.
The size of the ships, the value of the cargo, the need to move things so quickly to keep those global supply chains flowing just provides them with a huge amount of leverage in contract negotiations. And that's something that happens kind of semi-regularly.
On top of that, dock workers are some of the most densely unionized workforces, making it much more possible for activist groups and workers to collaborate on things like, say, a blockade of certain ships. Case in point, the Oakland-based ILWU Local 10's refusal to handle cargo from ships going to apartheid South Africa in the 80s.
Just to bring this to the context of Palestine, it's actually many of those actions that are around South African apartheid that people learn from and hark back to.
Longshoremen from Local 10 are hitting South African and American businesses in the pocketbook.
The ILWU endorsed a boycott of South African goods in 1962. And in 1984, the workers took matters into their own hands. With the support of local community activists, longshore workers refused to unload South African cargo from a ship for 11 days.
This is more than just another demonstration. This is a challenge to our system of free enterprise. Here you have millions of dollars worth of goods on a ship back there, and people here saying that if you do business with South Africa, you can't do it here.
It was one of the most impactful direct actions against South Africa at the time.
This money is made off the most extreme exploitation of the black people in South Africa. Families are divided. Every minute in South Africa, a child under 5, on the average, dies of starvation.
The 11-day blockade inspired thousands of people from the Bay Area to come out and support the dock workers. And it even earned praise from Nelson Mandela.
We salute members of the International Longshoremen and Warehousemen Union Local 10
In 1990, Mandela delivered a speech thanking the local 10 workers at the Oakland Coliseum.
In response to this demonstration, other workers, church people, community activists, and educators gathered each day at the docks to express their solidarity. They established themselves as the front line of the anti-apartheid movement in the Bay Area.
In order for such a prolonged work stoppage like this to happen, there needs to be trust, buy-in, and a real sense of mutual solidarity between the workers and the community.
Sometimes it works extremely well. Other times, if there's antagonism, people can think, oh, they're here to get our jobs, they're attacking our jobs, and it doesn't work well.
In their research, Katie and Rafif have found that what does help to build trust is having someone who serves as a bridge builder.
A bridge builder is somebody who can help with that communication and dialogue. They are somebody who's well-trusted, well-respected, but knows the inner workings of the union really well.
And that person also needs to be able to persuade any union members who aren't already bought into the issues they're being asked to sacrifice work for.
It's not simply about the social movement writing a really well-argued manifesto. It's about the workers actually saying, we're not handling those goods.
Which can be a difficult tightrope for both activists and workers to walk, because these groups of people often have preconceived ideas about each other. Here's Katie Fox-Hodes.
It goes something like this. So social movement people are sort of middle class, college educated folk, and they don't really care about our issues as workers or understand our issues as workers. They're just interested in pushing their own agenda, and they don't really respect us. And then on the other side, I think there's often a view among social movement activists that the labor movement can be quite conservative, quite reactionary, quite insular, and in some respects, even privileged. They have certain privileges that they're not willing to use, and it creates real barriers to working together.
I think what's been really difficult, if I'm being very honest, during the past 2 years is that these kinds of relationships and bridge building takes a lot of time. And it's difficult when your people are trying to stop a genocide and trying to stop people being killed. It's almost like we're working at different tempos. One is extremely urgent, and the other one, by its very nature, is very slow.
The current bombardment of Gaza has been the deadliest conflict yet between Israel and Hamas.
In what was the biggest attack on Israel in years, Palestinian militants launched a barrage of more than 5,000 rockets in a coordinated attack by land, sea, and air.
101 civilians were murdered in Be'eri that day. 30 more were taken hostage.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה. Israel is at war.
This is a missile attack right in the middle of Gaza City.
Media said some 35 homes and 90 cars were torched by some 400 settlers.
The World Food Program has run out of food in Gaza as Israel's blockade remains in place.
That brings the total death toll since the Israel-Hamas war began to more than 52,000 people.
For anti-war activists, this is one of the most desperate times. But it's also far from the first desperate time for the Gaza Strip. Since 2008, there have been 5 wars between Israel and Hamas, each with high rates of civilian casualties and destruction of vital infrastructure. In Oakland, California, pro-Palestine activists have responded by targeting ships carrying Israeli cargo.
In both 2014 and 2021, protesters successfully blocked Israeli cargo ships at the Oakland port.
And dock workers have been vital to those protests, refusing to work Israeli ships. These demonstrations were part of a pro-Palestine campaign called Block the Boat. Campaign organizer Lara Kiswani has been working with dock workers for over a decade. Our producer, Ilana, visited Lara in San Francisco to learn more about how Block the Boat got started.
We had thousands of people in the streets, and we wanted to do something more.
Lara met me at her office in the middle of a busy day. She'd just come back from speaking to an assembly of 1,500 nurses about Palestine solidarity activism.
It was inspiring, I will say. Like, wow, these folks are fired up and they're going through their own struggles, you know? Yeah.
As the head of the Arab Resources and Organizing Center, or AROC, Lara balances her work providing social services, like legal assistance and youth programming, while also leading organizing efforts around Palestine.
My everyday is serving and organizing our community for working class Arabs and Muslims across the Bay Area, but also fighting for the dignity of our people from here to our homelands.
In 2014, during Operation Protective Edge, Israel's military campaign in the Gaza Strip that killed over 2,000 Palestinians, AROC was at the forefront of organizing anti-war protests.
And at the time, we formed a committee of different community organizations that we would convene on a regular basis and try to think about how do we mobilize in the most effective and efficient way possible that has an impact.
And in that committee, an idea formed around doing a community picket at the Port of Oakland, home of the ILWU Local 10. But it was important for Lara to do the relationship building first.
And we decided to go to the Port of Oakland every weekend and leaflet to the workers in the morning shift at 4 or 5 a.m. and also in the afternoon, bring donuts and coffee and just build with workers and let them know why we felt it was important for them to stand in solidarity with workers in Palestine.
Lara didn't just want the union members to honor their picket line and refuse to work the Zim ship. She wanted them to be part of the campaign every step of the way. Remember how Rafif and Katie explained the importance of having a bridge builder between the union and community activists? Well, that's what the Block the Boat Coalition needed. And Tova Fry, who was living in Oakland at the time, knew just the right person for the role. Clarence Thomas. No, not the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, but former Black Panther and ILWU Local 10 dock worker Clarence Thomas.
I was born and raised in Oakland, California. African-American working class family. My maternal grandfather started working on the waterfront in 1944. He was a part of the second great Black migration coming to the Bay Area from the South.
Clarence Thomas is a retired third-generation longshore worker and author of Mobilizing in Our Own Name, an anthology of radical African-American trade unionists. He grew up around longshore workers, and he understood how important it was to his family and his community that Local 10 is a predominantly Black local.
It represented men who worked with their hands, who were able to live in places where Black professionals lived, be they doctors and lawyers and real estate agents, school teachers. And they had a great deal of respect by not only the Black community, the white community too.
For Clarence, it was hardly a question whether ILWU Local 10 would participate in Block the Boat with AROC when they were called on to do it. And he was moved by Lara's approach.
She was a very principled person. She wasn't somebody who wanted to be opportunistic and come down to the port without getting our buy-in.
In the weeks leading up to the community picket, he talked to rank-and-file workers and helped make them aware of what was happening in Gaza and why it was important not to work ships connected to Israel.
The workers, they had a sense of this is our time now. They understood it, and they were prepared.
They were in solidarity. In fact, at some point, I remember flyering at the Union Hall, and someone was like, oh, yeah, we're not touching that ship. We're not touching that ship. Like, it was just almost understood.
Talking to the rank-and-file dock workers gave the coalition confidence that they would honor their picket line when the time came. But they also wanted the union leadership on board. So Clarence arranged for Lara to speak at a Local 10 executive board meeting. But she was never able to make her appeal.
Lara came to the meeting prepared to make the case for Block the Boat. But when it came time to address them, some board members insisted on adhering to a union resolution that blocked people outside of the union from participating in meetings during contract negotiations.
She was very upset. She was in tears, and she wanted to know what all of this meant. And I told her, I said, don't let this bother you. I said, everything is going to be okay.
Clarence told Lara that the key thing was to bring a whole lot of people down to the port to make the point.
And I went back in there, and I immediately told the executive board, I said, listen, there's going to be thousands of people who are going to be marching down to the port to protest an Israeli vessel. And I'm going to be marching with them. And I said, and if anyone crosses that picket line, I said that would be a point of departure that they would never live down. And of course, people said, oh, no, we're not crossing the picket line, Clarence.
According to the ILWU's founding principles, They actually can't cross any picket lines. This might be a little bit confusing because when we think about picket lines, we tend to think of workers on strike. But for the ILWU, this also applies to community pickets, protesting work happening at the dock. And this is actually the key to the success of Block the Boat. You see, the ILWU still has obligations to the employer, but they have clauses in their contracts that say that if a community picket poses a health and safety issue, they don't have to cross it. And that's the mechanism they use to block boats.
Blocking the boat really means that there's a community picket line and longshore workers don't work it.
When they felt sure their plan was solid and the dock workers were on board, the coalition identified the next Zim ship that was scheduled to make land at the port of Oakland. It was August 16th, 2014 at 5 a.m. They spread the word and asked everyone who could come to join their picket line.
We had shuttles, we had like a team for logistics and accessibility and food.
When they arrived that morning, there were thousands of people there.
United will never be defeated!
Lara couldn't believe it.
This is pretty incredible.
People united will never be defeated!
Most people didn't take jobs that day. They didn't even take those jobs. They worked some other places because they knew that ship was coming in and there was going to be a demonstration there.
But Zim wasn't going down without a fight. In anticipation of the picket, the ship turned around and likely assumed the protesters would go home and not come back.
So they said, we'll just wait them out.
But every day, for 5 days, while the ship made attempts to evade them, coming to different terminals, trying to make it look like they were leaving, the demonstrators regrouped.
As soon as we would learn that a ship was scheduled to be worked, that's when we knew we had to show up. And if something shifted, we shifted course and we moved.
It was an industrial-sized maritime game of cat and mouse.
It's our job to counter this war. In order to counter this war, we have to show our solidarity.
It wasn't possible for the activists to come out with the same show of force for all 5 days. But the workers were tracking the ships, too, in order to make sure they weren't working the Zim ship.
The picket lines got smaller, but the union members were still not working the cargo. And that shows a social consciousness of the rank and file. You know, solidarity is not an empty slogan. It is an old saying that if you give the rank and file all the information, 99 times out of 100, they'll make the right decision.
Ultimately, the ship was not unloaded. The boat was blocked.
Let it be registered that today, not only that we blocked the racist Zim liner, the Israeli ship.
Zim did try to come back in September and October of 2014, and once more in 2021. That time, it was the union that gave Lara the heads up the ship was coming. Each time the ship came, it was prevented from unloading. And now, Zim ships don't show up at the Port of Oakland anymore.
They don't come because they know they're not going to get it worked. So it became less beneficial to the Zim shipping line to come to the Port of Oakland when every time they come, workers are not going to dock, unload, or load that ship. So they stopped coming altogether.
For Lara, this outcome is about more than just a successful campaign. It changed how she feels about being a Palestinian in the Bay Area.
It makes me proud to live in Oakland. It makes me proud to be in the Bay Area and proud to have relationships with really principled leaders and workers and allies. Knowing that Zim can't and won't show up to the Bay, and if they do, they're going to get turned away, is, I think, something the entire Bay Area should be proud of. The fact that we know that we have the solidarity from ILW Local 10 and other ILWs, we feel more safe, right? Like, I feel like I belong in the Bay Area because at least the Bay stands for Palestine. And that makes me feel more comfortable raising my child here and having to navigate the repressive regime and systems we're still having to navigate on a federal level.
This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
That first Block the Boat campaign did what it set out to do, and Tova Fry had an up-close look.
That's where I kind of got my feet wet with organizing at the port.
Then she moved out to New Jersey in 2021 from the Bay Area. And shortly thereafter,
this morning, explosions in Gaza, smoke and flames rising from multiple blasts. After a night of air raid sirens and rocket attacks on Israel,
Tova wanted to do something. She was already helping out with the Block the Boat campaign on the West Coast from afar, when she thought maybe it could happen again there in New Jersey. But she quickly met multiple obstacles that she hadn't come up against in the Bay Area. For one, it's much more difficult to plan mass protests there because the port is sequestered from the rest of the city and near impossible to get to by public transit, unlike the Port of Oakland.
You have West Oakland BART, which is a marchable distance to the port, whereas here, the logistics of even getting to the port are very challenging. You'd have to go there and see it to understand.
I did try it, both by car.
I don't even really understand where this is a big warehouse.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection authorized vehicles only. And by public transit. The closest New Jersey transit stop to the port is the stop for Newark Airport. You can't get off at that stop without going through the airport first. It's clear why it would be hard to gather a big enough picket line there. But it wasn't just that. She and another activist did make their way to Port Elizabeth to try and appeal to the rank-and-file ILA dockworkers by handing out flyers at their employee parking lot.
The security guards came and said, "This is private property, you can't do that here." So we stepped back onto the street, and they said, "Oh no, this whole street is private, you can't do it here." And so he called the cops, which turned out to be the Port Authority, the Elizabeth Police, the Customs and Border Patrol. We were suddenly surrounded, and they wouldn't let us leave. They wanted us to show our ID and everything like that before we were even allowed to say, "Okay, well, we'll leave."
How did you feel?
Well, it was very annoying because it really felt like an infringement on free speech and on the workers' free speech as well, because they had the right to get this information, but they were being denied that opportunity.
And the ILA dockworkers she did manage to reach weren't interested in what she had to say. Clarence Thomas of the ILWU Local 10 hasn't had much luck connecting with ILA dockworkers either.
I've had discussions with them and they've tried to work with them, but do I have conversations with them about the Palestinian struggle? Is that what you're asking me? No, not at all. There's no reason to have that discussion. You have to understand one thing. The ILA is a top-down organization. They're top-down.
But you don't think the rank and file could organize?
No, I do not. When you look at the organization of the ILA, especially in the South, the majority of the members are black, but the leadership is white. They didn't even take action to support Juneteenth. It's a different reality for them than it is for the ILWU.
I reached out to the ILA to comment for this story. They didn't respond to my requests.
One of the reasons that we were trying to reach the ILA was because we were curious about what might be possible if the ILA and ILWU were coordinated. But what we found was that even between two ILWU locals, there were major political and cultural differences. In 2014, when Iraq was organizing Block the Boat, there were efforts to plan similar demonstrations in other places, including the West Coast's largest port in Los Angeles.
We stood outside of the ILWU dispatch hall for about 4 months, flyering, talking to longshore workers, trying to get them to move on this.
This is Charmaine Chua. She was part of the efforts to organize a Block the Boat LA. And when she talked to dock workers, she was met with some disinterest, some aggression.
But the majority of people said things like, what you're asking us to do is stop the movement of American goods into America. That is neither good for us as dock workers, and it is also not good for America.
Charmaine is an acting associate professor of geography at UC Berkeley.
My research is on logistics and supply chains, and I have been thinking about supply chains and their role in international solidarity for the better part of a decade.
According to Charmaine, our ability to block weapon shipments physically is pretty limited. First off, when it comes to moving weapons, it's the United States Air Force that's quite literally doing the heavy lifting.
At the height of the war, they were sending C-5 planes, some like 20 C-5 planes every 24 hours, to Israel directly, and those are massive military airplanes that can carry as much as a full tank on them.
And weapons get delivered through military ports and bases.
Very little of that is ever open to the public. None of the information about military logistics is disclosed. The U.S. Department of Defense has its own logistics wing and logistics command that oversees the transportation of finished goods.
Commercial shipping lines like Zim and Maersk do sometimes move military goods.
Most commercial ships really carry, at best, non-illegal material. So Maersk ships, for example, they carry rations. They might carry things like soldiers' uniforms. They might carry components of weapons parts, but they don't usually carry actual military weaponry.
Maersk has become a major target of activists at ports this past year after the Palestinian youth movement launched its campaign, Mask Off Maersk.
Maersk is one of the companies that have been uniquely responsible for this genocide. To give an example,
since Mask Off Maersk launched, the company has been a target of protests at ports all over the world. In early October, a group of about 100 protesters not affiliated with any specific activist group targeted both Maersk and Zim by blocking the road to the Port of Elizabeth in New Jersey.
The Port of Elizabeth has both the MAR terminal and the APM terminal, out of which function Zim and Maersk.
I think that there's sometimes a fetishization of this imagination, that it is actually physically stopping empire in its tracks. And I think that misunderstands the power of capital to constantly find new sources and ways of rerouting itself around disruption. Capitalism is constantly sidestepping disruption. When Zim, for example, was stopped in the West Coast ports, it sold its stocks and shares to a holder in Singapore.
For Charmaine, it's important that activists understand this complexity because it's part of building what she calls a durable strategy, particularly for people who work at the port. Dock workers' power relies on their ability to do business with their employers. If activists are asking dock workers to block ships all the time, those workers run the risk of losing that leverage, not to mention their livelihoods. Here's Clarence Thomas again.
So their attitude is, yeah, I'm ready to block some boats, not realizing that when you do that, you're basically preventing people from being able to go to work on a given day. And I do think that a number of people in Local 10, they do feel a sense of responsibility and don't mind missing a day's pay in order to show their solidarity. But those actions should be taken very judiciously.
Do you sense that there's a sense of burden on longshore workers?
Local 10 members, yeah. And I remind leftists, and particularly white leftists, that you cannot exploit Local 10 because of your reluctance and inability to organize in your own areas, your own unions, your own communities. They're not asking of themselves what they're asking from Local 10 members to do. And that's the reality.
It's sort of like the idea that when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Because when people believe that their only way to block weapons from reaching Israel is to blockade the docks, not only do they strain dock workers, but they're also not looking at their own workplaces as a possible entry point.
I'm just being truthful. People have to stop being scared. You know, they have to start challenging things in their own union.
Right now, trade unionism in the United States is low in terms of density, and worker protections are limited, something that Tova Fry has run up against in her organizing at the Port of Elizabeth. When she couldn't make any headway talking to the ILA dock workers, she pivoted to organizing port truckers. And she found that they were much more ideologically sympathetic.
Essentially, they're a large immigrant workforce, and they're more likely to support Palestine and other international struggles because They come from different parts of the world where they're just more aware of the international situation and much more sympathetic to the struggle to free Palestine.
But the port truckers are not unionized.
Totally different organizing challenge there.
Organized workforces are key to the kind of logistics activism that made Block the Boat so successful. In order to do strategic work stoppages, they need the protections of a union to be able to act collectively and still be able to make a livelihood.
My take is that international solidarity at the end of the day requires long and deep efforts to think about contract terms, organizational forms, institutional clauses that allow people to take on these actions in a way that doesn't just pick up episodic opportunities for disruption, but actually try to transform what it means to think about oneself as a worker, right? I work on logistics, and logistics is this incredibly complex industry in which workers here, Amazon workers who have to pee in bottles in order to deliver things on vans, to people who are breaking their backs in warehouses, to dock workers who are transporting goods, are all part of these massive international supply chains where the part that they're transporting was made by a super exploited Chinese worker in a factory in Shenzhen or an Indian worker putting the steel part of a Boeing together. And I think without trying to envision what the supply chain laces together, which is the people of the world, we lack a real way of grappling with where you can sort of materially harm the imperial supply chain.
We're not speaking about some far away, deserted locations where these arms are being produced. They're produced in people's backyards, and it's completely horrific and unbelievable. The destruction it has caused. Right now, Gaza has the highest number of child amputees per capita in the world. I think it's scary, not just for Palestinians, but for anyone in the world, that this arms industry is functioning in the way that it is and is making profits. Those were weapons that were made by people. They're people, and they're people who go back home to their families and hold their children. And that's scary. You know, sometimes we use the language of global capitalism, and of course there's capitalism and there's profits, but there's also hands and people that are making these things that end up shattering lives. And at the most basic human level, that's the story we're being sold, is that the only way you can have a roof over your head is if you're making killing machines. Any human, I would hope, would be against wanting to be any part of this, whether it's Palestine or Congo or Yemen or Sudan. That's really the question. It's broader than Palestine. It's about how these economies are structured and who's profiting and how normal it is.
Next time on Things That Go Boom, we go to LA to talk to another group of activists who took on the military-industrial complex and won.
Ultimately, one of them said, well, you can take your white middle-class nightmare and sleep with it, because we have an economic holocaust going on right outside our door here in South LA, and where the hell are you?
Before we go, I just want to pop in to say that right now at Inkstick and Things That Go Boom, we're trying to get out the word. It's time for our annual Newsmatch campaign, which means that every dollar that you donate between now and the end of the year will be doubled. As a nonprofit news show, we rely on your support. And this year, that support is more important than ever. I don't think it's any secret that independent media, and especially nonprofit media, is under attack. And those attacks are serious enough to threaten our very existence. We need your help to keep delivering the kind of fearless journalism that you've come to rely on. Shows like this one that challenge convention, hold power to account, and show us a different side of security. So if you love Things That Go Boom, take a minute right now to go to inkstickmedia.com/donate or tap the link in our show notes. Every dollar makes a difference, and this month, it goes twice as far. Thank you for listening and for standing with us. Things That Go Boom is distributed by Inkstick Media and PRX. This episode was produced by Ilana Levinson with some help from me and edited by Katie Toth and Nico Bell. The music for our show is written by Darian Schulman, and Robin Wise makes our show sound its very best always. Thanks, as always, to the supporters and the foundations that make our work possible. The Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Cologne Foundation and Plowshares Fund, as well as Inkstick supporters including the Riva and David Logan Foundation, Craig Newmark Philanthropies, Prospect Hill Foundation, and the Jubitz Family Foundation. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
I don't even really understand where this is a big warehouse. Am I still driving to
Yeah, you're still.
our terminal containers?
It's still telling us I'm right on North Fleet.
Okay.
Look, there's a cat. Is the cat rolling around?
Do you see the cat?
Yeah, just rolling. Oh, another cat.
Another cat?
Yeah, behind.
Oh, that cat.
They're cats. 3 cats.
3 cats.
From PRX.